Good afternoon. Welcome to our weekly edition of the WRAP. I'm Laura Leslie, WRAL Capitol Bureau Chief.
And I'm Travis Fain, WRAL State Government Reporter.
And boy, has it been some week. Abortion basically ate all the oxygen in the room this week, which is pretty rare coming into an election season. But, you know, Monday night, that leak of the decision, the draft decision in Dobbs is really kind of, rocked things in the political world for the week. And we spent a whole lot of time covering that this week as well.
Yeah, and I mean, the fallout from that, for a thing that hasn't even happened yet, of course, and we'll wait and see what the actual opinion looks like. I probably don't have to tell the people who listen to this that a Supreme Court opinion that changes 3 or 4 words can be a different Supreme Court opinion.
Yeah.
But it does look like we're about to strike down Roe, which is, I don't think the impact of that politically can be overstated. It's going to have ramifications kind of up and down. In people's real lives, first of all, before we get into the politics of it, but then the politics as well. Although I think here, I think that the guess is status quo, at least for a while, right? Because we've got a Democratic governor who vetoes abortion legislation.
Right. And we've also, that 20-week ban is currently held up in court. And that injunction isn't going to go away by itself. So we're going to need some kind of legal action to remove that injunction and put the 20-week ban in place. So that even that's not going to happen overnight. But I think Republicans made it very clear this week, from Michael Whatley, NCGOP chair, to Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, lots of people making it really clear that they do intend to try to move ahead on additional abortion restrictions pretty much as soon as the coast is clear of a veto threat.
Yeah, which would either be after the elections if a Republican supermajority comes in, which I think is pretty unlikely, not outside the realm of possibility, but kind of unlikely. But boy, the governor's race in 2024, if we stay on this course, abortion just became the #1 issue in that race, I would think. Do you agree on that?
Yeah, and a lot of races all over the country. This is, what the Dobbs decision did is say, push it back down to states and say there's no federal right to abortion. States can decide if there's a right or not, and what that right might look like. And so all of the pressure, not all the pressure, because Congress could still step in and take action, right? But that seems unlikely given the situation with the Senate balance of power and the filibuster. So, and that really does kind of push things down to the state level. And, state legislative races just got a whole lot more attention than they've gotten in a long time, because, now it's like, oh, they're actually going to be deciding on some basic civil rights. So, yeah, I think it'll have a bigger impact than people think. Because I think, as a woman, a lot of female friends, a lot of them are pretty mad. Even Republicans are pretty mad. So I don't know if there's time for that to go away or fade into the distant past by the time we get to November, and that's possible. But I don't know. I think they've just woken up half of the electorate, and I'll be interested to see how that plays out.
Yeah, as will I. I think we have a decision to make here now, Laura. Are we going to talk about Madison Cawthorn, or are we going to give people a Madison Cawthorn free show and say you're welcome?
I think we have to mention him.
It does feel like that.
There's been a lot, right? There's been a lot. There was a video, and I'm just not going to go anywhere with that. If you've seen the video, you know what I'm talking about. If you're watching this, you've probably seen the video. So, and he, of course, said that was just clowning around. And then there's apparently some House ethics complaints filed about various spending in his campaign, how much he's paying his chief of staff, how much he's paying his scheduler and cousin, and in the meantime, we've seen reports that he's making a lot of money, but he's spending a lot of money. He does not have all that much cash on hand at this point. And there's a bunch of different groups that are running ads against him, both on TV and by mail now, that are, and basically Senator Tom Tillis basically told CNN yesterday he is working hard to get Cawthorn out of office, which is the clearest one I've heard yet from Tillis. So that's a really interesting race.
Yeah, and the question is, can Senator Chuck Edwards, who's running against him, one of 7 Republicans running against Cawthorn out west, can he make up enough ground to get up over 30% and win a plurality? Not a plurality. What do you call it when it's 30%? Enough. enough to win in that race. Cawthorn's still polling. What was it, 38% the last time we saw a poll? Maybe
Yeah, that
last
was
week.
before the video though.
And the video,
And the lingerie and the,
if there are questions about his sexuality, which who cares, but some voters out there might care. Would that be enough to where the traffic tickets and other things weren't? I just don't know. I don't
I
know.
don't know either, but I will tell you, I mean, it's not from what I've seen a lot of discussion on Twitter. It's not okay for a lot of people. It's not that he is or is not attracted to other men. It's that if he is, it's hypocritical for him to run on some of the positions that he's run on in the past regarding LGBTQ issues.
Yeah.
So, I think that's kind of the crux of the matter. But I don't know that this will have alienated anybody who was already going to vote for him.
Yeah, I just don't know how any of it's going to play out there. But I mean, I'm where I have been for a while, that he continues to be the favorite in that race. I mean, the power of incumbency and the power of celebrity is very difficult to overcome.
In the meantime, we should also mention Bo Hines has ads running against him, really, in heavy rotation this week.
Right.
Kelly Daughtry's got one up, and then I think there's an outside group that's got one up. I've seen a couple of different ones. So, haven't had a real job and et cetera, et cetera. He did, however, apparently move to Fuquay Arena officially. So he can no longer be blamed for not living in the district.
I saw an ad that I think is running down in Johnston County from a local Republican group. It's a map of I-40, basically saying you go 145 miles that way, you'll be back where you're from.
Oh my. Anyway.
Yeah. So I don't know what to expect in that race. We're talking about the 13th, of course, the Republican primary, and the 13th. He's going to win that. I think what limited polling I've seen, he leads. And I have heard some theories that Devan Barber, if it gets to a runoff, is the man to beat down there for the Republicans. But what I don't know could fill a warehouse here. Kelly Daughtry, as you said, has spent a lot of money.
And she's got a lot of the establishment folks on her side. I mean, not least because she's Leo Daughtry's daughter, and Leo Daughtry is a longtime Republican lawmaker and well-liked.
Mm-hmm. And I think Chad Slaughter has like the NC Values Coalition endorsement in that race. Forgive me if I'm wrong about that, but I don't believe I am.
No, you're right.
Kiersey has been advertising heavily in that race, or somewhat heavily. I guess that's a real relative term. So, I mean, there's a lot of ways for that vote to get split down there. Whereas in the Democratic primary, it's Wiley Nickel and Sam Searcy. And I haven't heard a ton from Searcy. I've heard a lot from Nickel, but then I repeat myself because I already said the name Wiley Nickel. For those that don't know, he is well known in the press corps for his reach outs. He is very active reaching out. So we'll see where it all ends up.
Like some media. So what else? Oh, I know I did a story Monday, but to be perfectly honest with you, I can't even remember it because it's been that kind of week. It's like every day has been abortion day. And it's like, nobody was prepared for this. We're thinking like June, right? And so it's just been this huge, colossal, story after story about all the possible ramifications here.
Well, let's talk about what we can expect from a legislative session. First of all, I don't think we expect anything from a legislative session until after the primary.
No.
When exactly, I don't know that's been finalized, but I was talking to Senator Berger's office today, and he's got like pre-session interviews the week of the primary. And then after that, the 23rd, 24th, look for the session to begin around then.
I thought they were going to start on the 18th.
Well, I think it starts on the 18th. That's the first day. But as far as action, like bill filing will start on the 18th. But as far as action, look for around the 23rd, 24th is what I was told. And of course, I think everybody probably listening to this understands that can be a moving target. It is not set in stone. There are, of course, two chambers. The gambling bill, the sports gambling bill, sounds like all indications are that thing's going to move quickly. It's going to become law. WUNC had a piece, I believe today, we're recording Friday, May 6th. I believe it was today that said sports betting to expect it to pass this summer, quoting Jason Sane, who is a sponsor, who's saying it won't even be
Yeah, I interviewed him about this not too long ago, and he sounded pretty optimistic at the time. But again, you kind of don't know. And I mean, you've heard from Speaker Moore, especially, and Senator Berger, that they do not intend for this to be a long session. Speaker Moore reiterated that Wednesday from the podium, saying, as long as the last one was, let's keep this one as short as we can make it.
And he may or may not have said July 1st. Berger's office told me July 1st is their target date to wrap things up. And I believe that's something I don't know. I wasn't there and I can't remember anything. So, that makes me great as a source. On the gambling bill, I have also heard from a couple of people to avoid a second vote in the Senate, because it's passed the Senate in a somewhat divided vote. It would have to pass the House, and then they would do a technical corrections bill to tinker with some things, potentially the amount of money, the revenue that the state could expect from it, so that we would avoid a second Senate vote. I think there are some folks over there that don't want to take that, and that would legalize sports gambling all over the state.
And I think, what we've heard in committee anyway is that the state's share of the revenue under that bill is a lot lower than a lot of other states are making. So, I think probably they've gotten some pressure to at least make it worth the while of the folks who are sort of, holding their breath to vote on this one.
Yeah. Speaking of money, the budget bill may be a conference report. I don't think that's been decided yet, but I'm told it's certainly on the table. That would avoid an amendment fight on the floor. I don't know what
it would
else.
Definitely speed up the process, but I mean, there's zero transparency.
Yeah, well, hey, what do you
Transparency, schmansparency.
It's funny how I've stopped expecting transparency. It only took a few years in North Carolina, and I just like, oh, what are you talking about? The marijuana bill, whether that, will that pass the Senate? I think so, pretty quickly. The medical marijuana bill, and then what happens in the House? What happened? What is Senator Bill Rabon, the sponsor and the rules chairman in the Senate, willing to hold hostage potentially to get that bill through the House, if anything? And Laura, are we about to have a session where the Senate wants stuff and the House doesn't really care? Because I mean, again, Medicaid expansion, that's something that the Senate has gotten on board with, to the extent any Republicans are on board with it, and the House isn't. Are we going to have a session where instead of the Senate being willing to go home with things undone, the House suddenly has that card to play?
I'd be surprised, because that's not really been the situation for a very long time. I mean, even when the Democrats were in control, the Senate usually held the upper hand in a lot of these negotiations. But I think you are seeing more, so some key retirements going on over in the Senate, some shuffling around in leadership, and some members like Senator Rabon, for example, who have very strong agendas of their own that may or may not be reflected by Senate Leader Phil Berger. And we're hearing more about that now than we have heard for the past few years, I think. So that could be one of the reasons that the Senate has held the upper hand for so long is because Senate leaders tend to hold a pretty tight control over their caucuses. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know in this case.
It'll be an interesting session, I think.
For sure.
Very quickly, I'll mention I did a lengthy story about Senate District 19 down in Cumberland County. This is the race where Senator Kirk Deviere, a Democrat, is running for re-election, but Governor Roy Cooper, also a Democrat, kind of saying, hey, not so fast, not a big fan of yours. And I am endorsing Val Applewhite in that race. She's a former Fayetteville City Councilwoman who also has, she's very well known down there and has quite the track record. So that is a real deal primary where the governor is endorsing for, we believe, the first time ever against a sitting Democrat and an incumbent. So I would commit that story to you. It's on NC Capitol. Just scroll
down. Really good. It's a really good story. I read it the other day. I learned a whole lot that I didn't know.
Yeah, thank you.
You also had a really good story about possible fallout from the abortion decision, pardon me, here we go back again, right? But on the Supreme Court races, which I think, obviously, if the abortion question comes down to the states, who's in charge of the state Supreme Court is going to get to be real important real quickly. And Republicans are very much hoping to pick up a couple of Democratic seats. One is an open seat, a retirement of Robin Anderson, I believe, or Robin Hudson.
Hudson, yeah.
And then the other one is up
The
for it.
Sam Irvin seat.
Sam Irvin
Sam
seat,
Irvin,
right?
the Democrat running for reelection.
They're gunning for that one too. So that could add an extra overlay of some very interesting dynamics to not just the primaries in those races, but to the general as well. And also, I should mention that we had our Senate debate on a couple weeks ago, NC Senate debate, sans bud, of course, like all the debates. This week we're going to have a segment we have 2 segments on the record with Sherry Beasley. So we felt like we needed to give her some equal time to make her case to the public. But she so far there wasn't a lot of point to having an actual debate. So we brought her in. Lena Tillett grilled her for about half an hour. So you'll see that on Saturday night. Really interesting discussion, I thought.
Yeah, and that one, because of the Kentucky Derby, I don't believe is going to play on television like On the Record normally does.
Really?
But it will be available online. It will stream in its entirety online, and I believe there's some plans to chop it up and get it out there. We'll make sure that we call attention to it on Twitter.
It's one of my pet peeves. Like, we never pay enough attention to courts. And the more, I mean, and not talking about WRAL, I'm talking about the media in general. We focus on those legislative races and the executive races, and we don't focus that much on the judicial races. But as more and more things seem to end up in court these days, year after year, the court seems to be sort of in charge of state government. It gets to be really important who makes these seats, right? So I'm just saying, we, writ large, journalism needs to do a better job of concentrating on the seats.
Well, we'll add that to the list. It can be very hard to judge a judge. It's something, and that's why you see a lot of places that don't have judicial elections. But that's a whole can of worms that I don't think we ought to open today.
Anyway, I think that's about all for me.
I think that's good, and I hope people have a wonderful weekend. Have a mint julep if that's your bag.
That's right, and watch the horses, and maybe next year you can bet on them.
Hey, there you go.
All right, have a great weekend.